Hello and welcome everyone to episode 35 of the Sights on Sinnoh podcast. I don't know why I hesitated there, but this is the anime podcast covering all of the Sinnoh journeys that Ash is going through as we head on our own journey towards Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. This week I'm joined by one of our many rotating co-hosts, JM. How's it going?
Hey, Will, it's going well. Thanks for having me, as always.
No problem. I am excited to talk about this set this week. But first, how are you doing in Unite? How's that going?
I just broke through Expert 1, which I've been stuck on for over a week now.
Oh.
Yeah, I had about, I want to say 30 rank battles where I just went up and down around Veteran 1, one gym. Not Veteran, sorry, Expert 1, one
Yeah, I
gym.
bet.
And I finally got to Expert 2. Was that this morning? Yeah. So, moving right along. Hopefully, I'll at least get to Veteran soon.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm curious if that update is going to help balance it out a bit more for people who like Wigglytuff, like myself, and some of the other characters.
Yeah, I like Venusaur, so I've seen
Ooh, nice.
some power increases.
Mhm.
It's not quite benefiting the moveset I like to use because I use Solar Beam, and the buff for Solar Beam is just cooldown, which isn't huge. But that
Right.
Unite move is way better.
Yes. I hear it does stuff now.
Actually defeats enemies. It's great. But yeah, I rotate between Venusaur and usually Zeraora. I've tried a few others, but those two are my favorites right now.
Cool. Okay. I am a clearly Sinnoh stan, so I'm Lucario maining at the moment.
Oh boy.
And then I think Wigglytuff or Ninetales is my second.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. Here, as we talk about Pokemon partners, this is something that kind of comes up in an interesting way for this week's episode. First one being the Keystone Pops. And the blurb for this one reads, Apom and Weasel are battling in a field when Apom deflects Weasel's Sonic Boom into an old stone tower, knocking it down. Then the skies darken, and a Pokemon emerges from the ruined tower. Spiritomb! Spiritomb flies off, causing havoc wherever it goes. First, of course, wrecking Team Rocket's dinner. Now, this episode starts off presumably like a few days or something after the events of the last one. And it immediately acknowledges what happened in the previous episode.
Right, the trade between Dawn and Ash, which I think, like, I was aware of this trade. This was one of the things that I think mentioned that I was looking forward to in seeing this season. Was that shift in the teams and these new dynamics. So it's nice to open to that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we're not gonna brush past that and maybe reference it like 10 episodes later. It's like, oh yeah, no, this happened, and we're gonna show you how that's panning out, which is nice.
Right, and it's similar. Sorry, it's similar to when Weasel was first caught. How that next episode they had that opening where I don't believe it was a cold open then either. It was just the regular, like, it didn't do the weird cold open thing that we've been complaining about for a season. It just opened to Buizel, like, training, doing, like, acknowledging what had happened regarding Buizel in the previous episode.
And just touching on that really quickly, what do you like about that trade? You mentioned some of the dynamic stuff. Was this something that you felt like was always going to happen, kind of putting in the context of what we've seen so far in the anime?
Yeah, I think it's been heavily hinted at with both Pokemon. You see Apom takes a liking to contests. I mean, there's even the episode where it goes with Jessie. Buizel is way more into battling. And, you know, from the start, even Ash had his eyes on Buizel.
Right.
Dawn was the one who ended up catching it. And I think it fits the personalities that have been established with these Pokemon. Um, and it's also just an interesting dynamic in that there have been trades in the show, but it's very rare that the trades are you see both sides of them long term. For instance, skipping way ahead to Journeys, there's an episode where Go trades some bug type Pokemon, and you never see the character he trades them with again.
Mm-hmm.
But Ash is still interacting with Apom regularly. Dawn is still interacting with Weasel. I mean, they all live together, so it's not like a huge change. It's just they're like fitting into the roles that best match them.
Right. It's not like a radical shift, and that almost makes it more interesting because with that you could kind of predict how there's going to be conflict or difficulties with that. And this one, it's a bit more of a smoother transition, I'd say.
Right.
And Brock here even acknowledges it's a big success that the trade between the two. And there is an interesting moment here in the closed captions that I wanted to point out, where it says that Dawn tells Apom to use Focus Blast, but it actually means Focus Punch. So,
right.
Small error there, but I was like, oh,
oops,
that is an actual move. So I'm like,
it is. I had to go back because I wasn't actually sure if I had to keep rewinding it to make sure I had the right move written down. I was like, is it blast or punch?
Yeah, so just a minor thing, and like typically during the movie, sometimes Pokemon TV does say what moves characters are using if like no one calls it out themselves. But I thought that was just a funny mistake there. I don't think Apom can even learn it at any level. Maybe Ambipom, but pretty sure not this cute little Apom here. But it does use Focus Punch to deflect a Sonic Boom from Weasel, which goes straight into this tower that's just casually on the side. And then, not a good sign, anytime something breaks, it starts glowing. And then the skies come around, and it's in the middle of the night, a full moon starts slowly getting covered up by clouds, and everyone's like, ooh, it's getting chilly, like something's happening clearly. What did you think about this setup for this episode here with such ominous atmosphere coming into play?
It's like very cliche. Like something's happening, like the music, like it's so dramatic. I don't know. I think it's from Lucario. It's especially dramatic. The whole time you're just like, okay, they really messed up here. And I knew where it was going just because I'm familiar with this part of the Diamond and Pearl game story. This we were saying before we started recording. I think this is one of the more faithful interactions linked from the games. I'd say like Eternal Forest was pretty good too, just because Cheryl was there the whole time. But in contrast to like Valley Windworks, which I think the anime totally slaughtered. I think this is one of those like points of interest that it's not a huge thing in the games. It's just there, and unless you're using the online functions in Diamond and Pearl, you don't really understand. Like it's just a pile of rocks, like a 2x2 pile of rocks in the game. But just like positioning, and there is like a hint of lore in the games about Spiritomb. So I think it sets it up well. It is again a bit dramatic for it, but I don't mind it.
I mean, if I had gotten Spiritomb, I would have been okay having something like this happen in the games, like just to signify, oh, this is a special encounter that you're gonna have.
Right.
But definitely for the purposes of the anime, it's like, okay, we get what happened here.
Right.
And Dawn pulls out the Pokedex to learn about Spiritomb, and I actually think it'll be a nice chance here to read this. Would you like the honor, Jam?
Yeah, sure. So the dex entry from the anime episode is Spiritomb, the forbidden Pokemon. As punishment for misdeeds 500 years ago, it was imprisoned in the fissure of an odd keystone.
Yeah, and that's pretty much spot on to what's in the games for Pearl, as you pointed out earlier, which is it was bound to a fissure in an odd keystone as punishment for misdeeds 500 years ago. Like,
It's
it's
literally
all...
just same words, they just reversed the sentence.
Exactly, yeah, they just flipped it around. So like, oh, cool, they just went straight to the source material for this one.
Yeah, so it looks like looking at the dex entries for all the games, that's always the second version's dex entry. Uh,
Interesting. Okay.
and the first version, so X and Y, Diamond Pearl, like the first one in any of those lists, usually their dex entries are consistent across generations. And so the Diamond entry is a Pokemon that was formed by 108 spirits. It is bound to a fissure in an odd keystone. So they kind of left out this bit of the lore.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how necessary it is to know that it's a combination of spirits rather than one angry ghost.
Right. I think it makes sense because that's more for like purposes of unlocking Spirit Tube, at least in Sword and Shield. Um, but I think it's still a fun translation of this Pokemon, and Spiritomb respects the Pokédex enough to get this entry read out loud before firing a Shadow Ball and then Hyper Beam at our heroes. With Weasel trying to step in with Water Gun, but the attack just goes straight through it, and then it gets blasted away by a Spiritomb's Dark Pulse, allowing it to just fly off into the distance. And Weasel's knocked out in just this one hit, so it's done.
Yeah, I like this actually. I like that Spiritomb seems overpowered, and it does for most of the episode. Because the noteworthy thing about Spiritomb in Gen 4 is when it was first released, it had no weaknesses.
Right, very much like Sableye in the generation prior.
Exactly. It wasn't until Fairy type was introduced that it actually had anything that was super effective against it.
Exactly, yeah. Because with Dark and Ghost, it cancels out normal types, fighting types, and psychic types, which would all be super effective, or like one or the other has that, but together it's literally unstoppable. So I really like how they portray that as well. Team Rocket, on the other hand, is not as happy as they're trying to eat their cookies and just get blasted in the face and have their cookies burnt to a crisp, with Jesse particularly being offended. Now, this is the weird part for me. It cuts to the next day.
Yeah.
So
that is weird. Does it take them that long to get to the village? Like,
well, for me, the weird part is like, did our heroes just say like, oh well, we'll just camp out here for the night, even though it's like stormy, this wild Spiritomb that just like knocked out Weasel, ran off, and they're like, all right, let's just chill out.
I mean, the storm dissipated pretty quickly, so that's not
that's
as
fair.
big a deal. But yeah, it's just weird that they just wait until the morning, and then the rest of the episode it goes from midday to night in literally 2 minutes. I know it's weird for anime episodes, but this one in particular is pretty bad about it.
I almost wonder if the first half of this episode, up until here, was like added on later.
Right. I mean,
and then they just forgot that it was nighttime in this, or that it was daytime in the rest of this episode, and they're like, "Oh, let's just do that night."
Yeah, I think they just like didn't know how to pace the passage of time so that like the village would be active when the heroes arrive there. But yeah, it's just weird.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess they also wanted to show like they didn't want Ash and his friends to arrive while Spiritomb is destroying the village.
Right. Because the whole purpose of this scene is for them to kind of understand that something terrible happened here, and they're trying to figure out like what the cause was, and slowly it dawns upon them that they might be responsible for this.
Exactly.
They start asking people, and there's just like Pokemon knocked out everywhere. And an old lady comes out, and she's like, "It was Spiritomb."
I love how they're like, "Huh? I wonder if it was Spiritomb." And
Yeah.
then she's just like right behind them, screaming, like this was Spiritomb.
Yeah, and you know what? Okay, she even explains like, yes, the seal on the thing that was capturing Spiritomb has been broken, and they're still like, what are you talking about? Can you explain it to us?
Yeah.
I'm like, put it together, guys.
Yeah, they take way too long to figure this out. And it's like they have the idea that it's the thing they released, and then they get confirmation, and then they still don't understand that they're the ones who caused it.
Yeah, maybe they're just in denial.
Well, and the weird thing is, the thing that gets them to figure it out is her explaining the legend from 500 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like, that's not as important as what you did last night.
Right. And you also know most of that information, like you could piece it together from the Pokedex.
Right.
So they're having a rough day today, clearly.
Clearly, yeah.
But that also maybe brings to my point, like maybe they added on that beginning later, and this whole thing was to explain like, hey, there was no Pokédex entry in the original script, so that's why we have to have this legend explain it, and maybe it was not them who freed Spiritomb in whatever the original concept was.
Right, that would make sense. Like, I could see that being the case.
Yeah, so, well, we won't know, clearly, unless maybe there's something in the trivia section, but this is where we get to the point of the old lady explaining how, after Spiritomb was defeated by a brave Aura Guardian, which we'll get to in a second, it was sealed away in a keystone under the Stone Hollow Tower. And this tower, of course, is the one that they unfortunately smashed last night in the training. I don't know if listeners are familiar for this. Well, two things first. Hollow Tower is specifically the name of the structure from the games.
Yeah.
So they don't even diverge from that, which is neat. Again, this is the location where, like, if you look up on Bulbapedia, is where Spiritomb can be found in Gen 4. And they explain, like, it's made of stone, and our heroes slowly realize they're the ones who did it. They apparently walk over to the tower with the old lady who's just freaking out.
Right. And they finally understand that, yes, they caused this.
Yes.
Despite knowing full well that they released Spiritomb, it's just now clicking.
Exactly. And she immediately turns her ire onto them, and they start apologizing pretty profusely, which is kind of funny to see. And she emphasizes again the Aura Guardian and his partner Pikachu specifically. And she talks about how fate might be involved in this because we see Ash is also traveling with a Pikachu.
Right.
The interesting part here is the term Aura Guardian. Yes. And are you familiar with this term, JM?
Yes, I am. I have seen the Lucario and Mystery Mew movie a long time ago. I haven't rewatched it recently, but I know that that's where the term, I think, first appeared in the anime.
Yes, exactly.
And it comes around a couple more times. Or at least auras do. But it's usually in reference to Lucario and Riolu sometimes, but mostly Lucario.
Right. Both these Pokemon are known for being able to sense the aura of others, and Pokemon and humans alike, and kind of understand how they're feeling and also the energy that they have. And Ash is established in that movie to have a strong aura himself, enough that Lucario mistakes him for his partner, who's an Aura Guardian. And now it's coming back around again, where I don't think anyone even acknowledges Ash's aura in this episode, but they connect him by saying like the last Aura Guardian who sealed Spiritomb had a Pikachu as well. I think it's just really fun that they bring this term in here from the movie, which was like 2 movies ago at this point.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's technically part of the Hoenn canon, right? Or that's the era that the Lucario movie's based off of, right?
Yes, at the end of that era, which would have been in Battle Frontier, so technically Kanto, it's like all the movies kind of take place in their own geographical area, which could or could not be the region they're traveling in. But yeah, it's like that Hoenn era where they're still traveling with May, Brock, and Max.
Right. So it's not even like a concept, like other than the fact that it's Lucario, which is a very Gen 4 Pokemon, it's not a concept that's really native to Gen 4.
Right, exactly. It's just kind of explained through Lucario here.
Right. Which we don't see at all.
Yeah,
There's
exactly.
no Lucario in this episode.
So Lucario has only been in the opening of the first season and not anywhere else so far.
Right. It's just weird to like hear so much aura talk and it not be linked to Lucario.
Exactly. And it gets a little weirder here because a group of people that are spirit guides and trying to at least pretend to be spirit guides, because spoilers, it's Team Rocket.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who could have guessed?
Are trying to basically trick our heroes and this old lady into believing that they're connected to the spirits and can tell what's going on, telling Ash that he's connected to Professor Oak, because of course they knew who Professor Oak is. Telling Dawn
This one was good. I really like this one.
Yeah, that she used to be a slowpoke in her past life.
Oh my god, she's like, oh my gosh, I was a Pokemon. And then she's like, wait, I was a slowpoke.
It peers out really quickly.
Mm-hmm. And then
Yeah.
What were they going for with Brock? Were they just out of ideas? They're just like, oh yeah, they say that his past life was the old lady who's standing right next to him. And she like yells at them saying that she hasn't departed this world yet.
Oh. No, I think they get interrupted because they like see the old lady. Do they say she was his past life?
They like hesitate and like point at her.
Okay.
And then she like freaks out at them.
Oh yeah. And they explain to her that their Sneasel, who's Meowth in disguise, has the ability to telepathically talk with Pokemon. Yeah.
But Pokemon already have the ability to talk to each other.
Yeah, it's like, oh wait, are they trying to explain that's how Sneasel can talk to us?
Yeah, I don't understand.
Yeah, very weird.
A lot of things with Team Rocket's disguise and trickery in this episode just don't make sense. Like less than normal. I don't know.
You know what's really funny also? When they mention Sneasel, Dawn's eyes light up.
Oh.
We've not seen this.
Is she reaching for that Pokedex? Is she?
You would think so, right? Because we haven't seen one.
Right, we haven't seen a Sneasel yet. And this wouldn't be the first time that she would scan a Pokemon and it not be a Pokemon. It would in fact be Meowth.
Yeah. So I don't know if they just didn't want to do that again, or for plot convenience, this kid just runs out and it's like, hey, Spiritomb's attacking town again, and everyone runs off. But I was like, oh wow, that jig could have been up really quick right there.
Right. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, it's weird that they like give her that moment. When like we all know that she's trigger happy with that dex.
Oh yeah. It's like her favorite item.
Her key item, Sneasel, aka Meowth, runs over to Spiritomb and starts talking to it, which it just looks like a confusing conversation between the two until it runs back. And James says it's using telepathy to explore the demonic depths of Spiritomb's thoughts.
First of all, that's like the most intelligent thing James has said.
Yeah.
Second off, this is just really weird. Not just the fact that Meowth is talking to Spiritomb, but the fact that Spiritomb is suddenly incredibly calm. Like what's weird about the whole mythos of Spiritomb is it seems just naturally malicious. Like obviously its motivations against Ash, which come up later, are that it's reminded of the Aura Guardian. And it wants revenge there. But the rest of the village didn't do anything as far as we know. It just really hates this particular village. But then it's willing to hold a conversation with Meowth and then let Team Rocket continue to be Team Rocket. And then it's willing to make deals with Team Rocket later. Like, you would think it's just, unconditionally trying to wreak havoc on everyone. But instead, it's just focus on this village, and as soon as Team Rocket is there, it's like, okay, I'll talk.
They just wanted to set Team Rocket up for this or something. It does feel kind of weird how it goes from being like almost mindless in its attacking rampage, and then just like lets itself kind of be pulled into this, even to the point where Jesse uses a wand to trap both Pikachu and Spiritomb in this cage of sorts. And they go through their motto and everything. They even get on the balloon and start flying away. And it's not until like a minute afterwards that Spiritomb is like, all right, I'm breaking out.
Yeah, it's got a lot of patience for Team Rocket, which is rare for anyone in the anime.
Yeah.
Or anyone watching the anime, let's be real. Yeah, it really just plays along. And this is a pretty in-depth Rocket intro too. So it's probably sitting there for a while. I don't know where they got the random giant Torkoal.
Yeah, and again,
Arbok. Yeah. And just recreated an Eastern creation myth in 2 seconds.
They really had fun with this episode, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the image now. It's great. I'd love to see an Arbok as the Ouroboros and a Torkoal World Turtle.
But what Spiritomb is inspired to do in its rage is just shoot a Dark Pole straight up through the Team Rocket balloon, making them crash. So Pikachu easily gets away, and then Jesse tries to fight it using the Viper, who's immediately blasted away with a Hyper Beam. So they just give up and start running away with Spiritomb hot on their tail.
Yeah, and now it's malicious again. It's like, now it's gonna. I mean, I guess it was provoked.
I mean, the best explanation is that it was just confused at what the heck Sneasel was doing.
Right. It's probably like, I've been trapped in this rock for 500 years, and my first real conversation is a cat dressed up like a weasel trying to understand why I'm destroying this village that imprisoned me.
Yeah. Or maybe Meowth is just saying Sneasel, but like, because it's Pokemon talk, it's Sneasel, Sneasel, Sneasel is all it actually hears, and it's like, what? Like, it's just confused.
Like languages evolve far past Spiritomb's understanding.
Exactly.
In 500 years, it's a completely different form.
It looks like it's willing to chase Team Rocket for another 500 years here, but they're not. They're like immediately collapse and turn around and ask it for forgiveness.
Yeah, and then they conspire?
Yeah.
With Spiritomb?
Exactly. Meowth translates and says that Spiritomb wants revenge on the Aura Guardian that sealed it up in the Keystone, and they're like, how long ago did that take place? 500 years ago? Okay, then.
Yeah, they're like, we can't really do anything about that.
Yeah.
A bit
And then,
late for that one.
exactly. And then Jesse tries to, again, say, like, oh, there's something over there, ciao, and they run away. So, they don't think of any better solutions because, of course, the Aura Guardian would be long gone by now. And they can't help it with that revenge.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's no way to really appease the Spiritomb at this point.
Exactly. But our heroes are still trying to figure out a way to recapture the Spiritomb, and Astoravia is going around looking for it. Dawn actually hatches a plan, which I thought was really neat.
Yeah, she's been thinking, and she's pretty observant, it seems like, in terms of coming up with things like this and turning things against Team Rocket, as we get to see in this fun little bit.
Right. She's like, hey, what did we see Spiritomb doing chasing Team Rocket? What does Team Rocket like to do? Chase us. Why do they chase us? For Pikachu. I was like, all right, yes, now here's the plan.
We use Pikachu as bait.
Exactly. And everyone just agrees to this, apparently, because next scene is Team Rocket flying overhead in their hot air balloon, and they see Pikachu just snoozing away in a meadow, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is too good to be true.
Because it is.
Exactly. They don't have a moment of hesitation here. And they go in for a landing. Pikachu opens up one eye to see what's going on, and they immediately fall into a pit trap halfway to Pikachu.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to the best moment of the episode.
Yes. Yes, this was so good. Because we've heard this motto, I want to say, at least 40 times already in this season.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every episode, but it's pretty dang close to every episode.
Yeah. And I'll read through it really quickly, but it's so good. It starts with a shot of like our heroes in silhouette with like this beam of light coming from behind them. And Ash says, listen, is that bad guy talk I hear? And Dawn says, it speaks to me loud and clear. And then on the wind, past the stars. And then Brock says, in your ears.
So good.
Jesse is immediately infuriated and says, that's the kind of imitation they invented lawsuits for.
Dang.
So just bravo. I love this. I wish it had gone longer, actually.
Yeah, I want a full version of the twerp motto, as I'm calling it. It's just like, it's so unnecessary. Mm-hmm. And they like immediately they're like, we don't actually care about you. We're here for Spiritomb.
Yeah.
It's just like they knew they had to do it.
Right.
You can't pass this moment up. It's an opportunity.
Yeah. Once in a lifetime.
Exactly. They're like, oh, we're never going to get to do this again.
They did get to do it once before, actually.
Oh, in one of the previous series?
Can you guess which region?
I want to say Hoenn.
Ooh, interesting. It was actually Kanto.
Really?
Yes, it was in the Ditto episode.
Oh, okay. I haven't gotten to that in my Kanto rewatch yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't really remember this episode either, but there's a moment where they all dress up in Team Rocket uniforms. And have like a whole spotlight stage, and Team Rocket's their captive audience as they go through the motto, which is just perfect.
God, of all the motto gags, I think this one's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, no, this one's great because it's very clearly like a role reversal with the pit trap and everything.
Mm-hmm. They went all out to channel their Team Rocket.
I love it. It's just I'm like imagining Dawn's like, oh, okay. And once we trap them,
and Ash and Brock are probably like, hell yes. Like,
Yeah,
of course we
they're
need
like,
to do
heck,
this.
do
Like,
it.
even if the plan completely fails, at least we get to do this.
Right. There's some silver lining in store for us.
And they were just so smug about it too. Like,
Yeah.
you can tell, like, all the characters like wanted to do this part.
Mm-hmm. This is the real reason they were on board for it. And Pikachu was like, "Oh my
Yeah.
god, the look on Meowth's face."
Just end the episode here, honestly. It's not getting any better.
Exactly.
Can't.
It won't get better for Team Rocket, apparently, though, as Spiritomb has caught up to them, and then they immediately try to conspire really quickly in the pit of what to do here. And what they do is come out of the hole, and Meowth explains, "Hey, so you remember that Aura Guardian you're really mad at? So we can't give you him, but you see that kid over there with the Pikachu? He's a descendant of the Aura Guardian." And Ash's IQ drops back down from the Team Rocket motto as he says, "You mean me?" and just points at himself.
Ash, please.
Yeah, it's like you were so close, buddy. And it launches a hyper beam at them. The old lady instructs them to get back to the stone tower, so they start running off in that direction with Spiritomb chasing them and the sun dramatically setting
Yeah.
after being like noon at most in the sky.
Yeah, this is the other part of the time passing weirdly in this episode is that as soon as it cuts, it's like sunset, and then it cuts again where Ash arrived at the tower, and it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 8:30 p.m. at least in the
Right.
winter. Like it's like middle of the night.
It then cuts again to nighttime after after like a few seconds. So this is all an effort to get Spiritomb close to the tower. Pikachu's attacks aren't doing much. It keeps trying to hit it with Thunderbolt, but the moves just are basically bounced off. Team Rocket is trying to use this as an opportunity to tire out both Pikachu and Spiritomb and grab at least Pikachu once it's out of energy. But Spiritomb kind of puts a wrench in that plan by firing a Hyper Beam, which misses and hits Team Rocket instead, blasting him off with a very, very unfortunate end to their arc this episode.
Right. And, you know, I mean, they played their part. They were there for the setup and the gag. We don't need them anymore.
Exactly.
The story's not about them, and I think this was one of the better ways to just resolve that thread.
Right. Like just kind of treating them as like they don't even know this that they get blasted off. It's just something that happens on the side. And now Pikachu's tired though, so they are trying to figure out what to do here to save it from a Giga Impact that Spiritomb launches on both Pikachu and Ash, which just knocks him back.
Jeez.
This is, I think, the second time they've been hit by a Giga Impact this season.
Really?
First time was with an Aerodactyl back in Orberg.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they've got some serious stamina going here. As Giga Impact's one of the strongest moves in the game. And after this, as hope seems lost, the storm clouds come back in from last night. And Ash says, "This is our last chance. Use Thunderbolt on the Sky Pikachu."
Mm-hmm.
Which fires a like somewhat weak looking electricity as it hits the sky, and you see sparks start forming in the clouds, which then launches a huge piece of lightning straight at Pikachu, and it glows, and everyone's like impressed by this as Pikachu is now fully recharged from this attack.
Right. Is Ash's Pikachu's ability Lightning Rod?
No, it is static, and
Static.
I don't think it can get lightning rod for at least a generation or two later.
Mhm. Okay, so they
Um,
just like explain this away rather than.
yeah, Brock says
r-
the lightning's recharged Pikachu's energy big time, and we've seen
okay.
this before in Jubilife.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
was
mean,
that what you were
it's
going to refer to?
happened.
Mm-hmm.
No, no. I mean, I know it's happened before. I was just curious if it was something like how they like finally mentioned Chimchar's Blaze by name.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if that was like another scenario there, especially because like Brock, this series is very big on pointing out abilities.
Right. Yeah, you would think it was the case, but lightning rod isn't even an ability that Pikachu can have at this point. And the anime does like to play with the idea of lightning, of like electric types being able to regain like life energy basically through electricity itself. Which
Right.
it's like that's fine. It would be neat if it did have a bit more of an in-game application, but I guess it's doable.
Right.
This does give Pikachu enough of a chance to get back on its feet and then get ready for a Volt Tackle command from Ash, which is of course its strongest move and the one that'll do most damage to it. It's able to pierce right through the Dark Pulse, and immediately the old lady from the village has flashbacks to the story of the Aura Guardian, which had Pikachu fighting against Spiritomb.
Right. The way she like looks at Ash and Pikachu throughout this is like, was she there? Is she is she that
Yeah.
old? Like
I I don't think so, but you would. I don't know. She's just really
it's
in tune with
ambiguous.
these retellings of the story.
She's just really into this myth.
Yeah, it's her one and only job, so she has to live up to it.
Right.
Barack runs over to the odd keystone, picks it up, and takes it back because what happens is once it gets knocked out with its Volt Tackle, Spiritomb retreats back into its stone, and they run over to the Hollow Tower with it and seal it back up where it glows a more pleasant light than what they saw the first time, indicating that it has been resealed, as the old lady mentions, saying that Spiritomb won't be coming back ever.
Right. It's very final.
Yeah, which is like, did you do something different to seal it so it won't get knocked out by a sonic boom? Because
Right.
I think that's still on the table.
Yeah. I mean, it's they rebuilt the tower in the exact same way.
It doesn't look any different. So I'm very curious what the idea is of this being a little more secure than the last time.
Yeah, I
So
don't think they have a plan
they
there.
they really don't. They kind of brush over this here. Ash does give Pikachu congrats, and then the old lady again sees like an after image of Ash and Pikachu compared with the Aura Guardian, saying that another legend has been born. Spiritomb was sealed away by the Aura Guardian and his loyal Pikachu, and she's like, "Ha, that'll be the new legend I passed down."
Yeah. And Ash is just like, I don't know. I don't want to be an Aura Guardian.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not an Aura Guardian. I'm gonna be a Pokemon Master. And she's like, oh, is that right? Ah, that works too.
Like, if you say so, kid.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, uh, uh, well, I'll say that till later. Okay, but she does offer them to come to their place and eat. And I'm like, yeah, they're probably so hungry. This has been a long day.
yeah, I mean, it's just like wraps up, happy ending.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know why Brock offers to cook. Like, buddy, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Like, she invited you. Like, you're the guest. Calm down, buddy.
Right.
But, you know,
But yeah, it kind of leaves us on the note that now we are moving on to Salacion Town, and the sky is nice and clear again.
Right.
So, what would you rate this episode?
Uh, I'd put it on the higher end. Like, it wasn't perfect. There were weird things with Team Rocket. I'd say around an 8. I really liked it. I thought it was like a bit dramatic in the start. It's a good like self-contained story, and it like it makes sense with the Pokemon. It follows that lore pretty well, and it's it's a good place for this story. I mean, matching up with the games. Like this is where the Hollow Tower is in the storyline,
right?
And it's something that like even in the games, it's more of like a one-off thing of like, here's the small little rock tower, here's Spiritomb, like move on with the game. So I think in terms of like a like intermission between cities, I don't want to call it a filler episode, but like an intermission, like it's a good story. I think it works. I do like the callbacks to the aura stuff. I do wish that was elaborated on more throughout Pokemon anime, because it's something they make a big deal of and then keep bringing up. But it's like they don't want to commit to it.
Yeah, they don't want to use up, I guess, the mystery of it. Though it will come up later this season, which is kind of neat. I also really enjoy this episode. Like, it's great on its own, but then it also throws in a few details there, like at the beginning, Weasel and Apom, and kind of acknowledging, like, okay, we're moving on with this. It doesn't immediately just go like, oh, nothing, like, just go in here blind. Like, no, there's something neat in acknowledging the continuity. It could easily have been an episode where it's like, we need all our Pokemon to fight this Spiritomb, and in some way, you could see that being the practical solution, but instead it's more about like, hey, let's bring Spiritomb back to the Keystone. Even though it takes them a while to like put it together that they freed Spiritomb, Dawn concocts a plan that's pretty clever. We get a really fun moment with them and Team Rocket. And then it turns more into a special moment between Pikachu and Ash, overcoming this challenge in a unique way, which for the most part kind of works, because even though that whole dramatic storm was happening in the opening, it kind of sets up and foreshadows this moment at the end with bringing down the electricity.
I really like that, because people give Ash a lot of crap about being like a clueless trainer and like doesn't actually know what he's doing half the time. But it's something that a lot of the characters actually remark on throughout all of the regions, is that he's very perceptive, and especially like is aware of his surroundings and is able to use more than just his Pokemon to win battles.
Right.
Like he uses his environment, like he's like, I think he'd do decent in like the current competitive metas with like weather spam and all that crap. Like I think he'd do well in those situations because he does take that stuff into account. Like I know there are some episodes where he takes, like obstacles or things in the battlefield into account. There's episodes where he comes up with like a really elaborate plan to beat Trick Room, which is its own wild thing. Like he does these strategies pretty consistently, and to be aware that, hey, there's a storm and I have an electric type that can recharge itself. I think that fits that continuity and that characterization of Ash that I think a lot of viewers write off.
Yeah, and if we're looking at it maybe even in a wider scope, it kind of shows that he learned something in the first episode of the whole anime.
Yeah.
When he's being attacked by Spearow and Pikachu jumps up with Thunder Shock and the lightning from the storm kind of boosts it. It's like, hey, let's use this to our advantage, but like on purpose this time.
Right. Here we are 4 regions later.
Exactly. So just super solid, and I think I'd give it like a 7.5. It's really close to being just a great episode all around for
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot to it that this people could definitely see as filler, but there's just so much in here that is really enjoyable to watch, and it goes by
Mhm.
really quickly.
It does. Yeah.
So another bonus to it there.
I also like that in this episode. Okay, so you said like an easy solution would be to send out all the team's Pokemon, which they do in the next episode. Um, but in here, we don't see Piplup at all, which is incredibly rare.
Yeah.
Ash's starters don't really show up, I don't think.
No, it's
Like
only
his
Weasel and
Sinnoh
Apom.
starters. And yeah, and we've had so much time where we've been focused on the Chimchar story, and before that, we've had some Turtwig centric stuff. So it's nice to get back to just Pikachu. I mean, we have Weasel at the start, but you know, the core of the story is Ash and Pikachu, which is something we haven't had in a while.
Yeah, and that also brings up to mind how in a recent episode of Game Theory, where they discuss how Pikachu levels differently as the seasons go on because the writers want to introduce and kind of spotlight the new Pokemon, Pikachu gets sidelined more than you would realize. So,
Yeah,
it's kind of like you would think giving Pikachu a spotlight is something that happens a lot, but it's really not. So it's kind of refreshing to see it done in a subtle way this episode.
yeah, I agree. And it's it's something because Pikachu's always there because he's never in his Pokeball. You just kind of assume that he's getting a lot of battle time, but
Right.
he's not.
Yeah. There's actually a surprisingly low ratio of battles that Pikachu's involved in that have him getting experience from knocking out the opponent
Right.
as the series moves forward. Now, a question of the week, I'd say.
Ooh.
What or in your experience with Sinnoh, did you ever get a Spiritomb?
I did.
You did. Wow.
I
Okay.
did when I was when I first played through the games. It was a group of like 4 or 5 friends who all had the games, so we did kind of just kind of spoofed it a bit where you can actually so the way to get it was you would go to the underground, and once you after placing the keystone in the tower, once you interacted with I think 32 players,
Yes.
you could check the keystone and Spiritomb would appear. Now we all got Spiritomb. This was a bunch of middle schoolers who all got the games together. But we did do the trick where it doesn't have to be unique players. So we would all just enter the underground, all talk to each other, then all leave.
Oh, okay. You know
And
what's
then
funny?
go back in. Yeah, what?
You can actually skip the whole process of leaving the underground if you just go into your base.
Yeah,
So,
I read that later.
Oh, okay.
Like, years like a few months ago I read that.
Oh, nice.
But I do have multiple Gen 4 copies and multiple devices, so if I really wanted to, I could recreate that myself without network, just local connection. So
Yeah. I actually have been meaning to do that because I've never actually had a Spiritomb in Gen
Really?
4. No, I had friends even that we would do some underground stuff together, but I guess we just never knew and never talked to each other much in the underground because we're trying to just steal each other's flags
Right.
in their bases. But yeah, I definitely want to do that now, and with multiple copies, it's totally possible. And I'm excited to do this in Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. I think this will be one of the first things I do and have Spiritomb on my team, if possible.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to run a Spiritomb because when I got it, I just put it in the box for the dex entry, and that was that. I didn't do anything with
Mm-hmm.
it. I wasn't like super versed in type advantages and stuff. Didn't realize that this thing is a tank.
Yeah. Though it might be a little different because I'm assuming fairy types
Fairy.
might be here in the remakes.
Yeah, we'll see how they incorporate that. See if they do anything with that. I mean, it's probably just going to be inherent to the game.
Right.
I don't think they'll make like special attention to fairy type or anything.
Exactly. Yeah. Just kind of incorporate it. But yeah, I'm excited to see that, and hopefully it's kind of similar and they don't make it like 108 people like it is in Sword and Shield.
Yeah, jeez. That one took forever.
That wraps up this episode of Sights on Sinnoh. So, JM, thanks so much for coming on, and I'm glad you have a history with this Pokemon as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really like Spiritomb. I think this episode did it justice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really had a lot of fun with this one, and I'm excited to see more of Spiritomb in the games.
Yes. Yeah, same here. I know it's not great in competitive, but I think it'll be fun to have for just a regular playthrough, which is always a fun time. But if people
Agreed.
want to find you, where can they do that on the internet?
Yeah, I am at TurtleGuy512. You can find me a lot of places with that one.
Cool. And I'm will be teasing on Twitter and Twitch, where you can catch me streaming or editing for this podcast sometimes as well. So just stay tuned to that. As always, if you want to listen to all our thoughts on the Diamond and Pearl anime so far, feel free to look through our playlist here on YouTube, wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you want to watch the episodes of the anime, these may or may not be available at the time of you guys listening to this, but Pokemon TV is the official way to catch them. So go ahead and do that to catch them all. As always, I've been Will.
And I've been JM.
And we'll see you in Sinnoh. Until next time, have a good one.